Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Charles Schwab Challenge Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into, a lot of data to dive into, want to show you all as I have been fervently in the weeds of the data this afternoon. Really excited, looking forward to it. Don't want to waste any time, so let's dig in right in, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram. Twitter and Instagram both, where I posted research today around winners going back to 2012 of the Charles Schwab Challenge here at Colonial. So if you would like to see a summary of that research and the 8 players that are in the field as of now that qualify under those criteria, give me a follow at the links in the description to the video. Twitter is also where I do place all of my betting cards for the PGA Tour every week. That is done Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So if you would like to see my weekly PGA betting cards, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I post my daily 3 up, 3 down for baseball. If you want some quick hitting baseball content, 3 players that I think are going to accrue their value in DFS baseball and 3 players that I don't, give me a follow over there. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Definitely want to hear from you all. Have you made any wagers today? I certainly fired off 2 very quickly when the odds came out this morning. What are you thinking is going to play well for the Charles Schwab Challenge and Colonial? Do you think any particular player has an advantage? All of that stuff, and what are you wanting to see tonight? So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 Charles Schwab Challenge. And we're going to start where we normally start on a Sunday evening. Not a Monday, a Sunday evening. At the GCSA Tournament Fact Sheet. As it was not out last night, it came out earlier today. So I want to run through this fairly quickly with you all, because not a lot has changed from last year's GCSA Tournament Fact Sheet. We are, of course, at Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth, Texas. It is still at a par 70, still listed at 7,209 yards. The stimp meter is fairly interesting. It's listed as 12, in between 12 and 13. 12 would be fast, and that's what we have seen the majority of the rounds be at Colonial. 13 is close to lightning. So the greens have never, at least per Fantasy National, have never measured lightning speed. So be curious to see how that shakes out this year. But I think it's safe to say that we're going to be looking at some fast bent greens with that. As I was pondering last night, and it ends up being that I remembered incorrectly, these greens are small, 5,000 square feet, as opposed to the tour average of about 6,000 square feet. So that explains a lot of the metrics and graphs that we saw in Fantasy National last night in the course breakdown. The greens are harder to hit. The 3-putt percentage is much lower. The proximity is much closer than the average tour event. That all leads to, or at least is a big factor into, or the greens being small is a big factor into all 3 of those criteria and metrics. 24 acres of fairway, so not a lot of fairway. We saw that last night as well. These fairways can get difficult to hit. 84 bunkers in play. While that is not a ton, I'm certainly debating with myself if sand saves might be something we want to look at. 6 holes with water in play. We have, of course, are on bent grass. The rough is Bermuda. The fairway is Bermuda as well. And nothing to do with architects, as this is a John Bertimus and Perry Maxwell design. So there is a quick look at Colonial from a GCSA Tournament Fact Sheet standpoint. Very fast, maybe even lightning bent greens, but certainly fast bent greens, small greens. Not going to do anything with short course metrics, as even though this is right on the cusp of being labeled a short course. It is still a par 70, so it's still fairly long by par standards. 6 holes with water in play, not a lot of fairway, and so on. So there is a look at the GCSAA tournament fact sheet for the Charles Schwab Challenge this year. Now we'll move to where we usually start a Monday evening. Let's take a look at Windfinder fairly quickly. And again, this is 2.5 days out from the tournament, so the weather probably will change a myriad of times from now until then. But doesn't look like a whole lot of wind in the forecast this week for Fort Worth. And if that's the case, then I can see this course playing much more closer to average in terms of difficulty than difficult. The wind, while it's not the only defense this course has, is certainly designed to be a part of it. And with little wind, at least as of now in the forecast, I can see some scores getting pretty low, or at least lower than what you would have normally seen at the Charles Schwab Challenge. Now, early next week, there does appear to be some wind. So if this comes, later into the week, maybe creeping into Sunday or Saturday, we might have to take a longer look at that Wednesday. But as of right now, no wind metrics to be looking at for the Charles Schwab Challenge this week. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National, and I have this default set to difficult, as that is what the majority of rounds have been here at Colonial, especially lately. You see 3 of the 4 rounds last year were measured to difficult. 2 of the 4 in 2021 were difficult. We did have an easy round in 2020, but you see the wind really, really laid down. And that is why I'm thinking that these scores might be a little bit lower this week if indeed this forecast holds and that there's not a lot of wind. You can see anytime the wind picks up, it can get into the average and difficult areas. So because I don't see much wind, I'm not going to do anything with wind tonight, but just in case the course is still playing difficult, your top performers when rounds have been difficult since the start of 2021. Those players have been Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Sung Jae, Tommy Fleetwood, Chris Kirk, Denny McCarthy, and Tony Finau. And very quickly, I've seen one more field change in addition to what was out last night. A reminder from last night, Keith Mitchell, Taylor Montgomery, and Parker Cootie had withdrawn for various reasons. Today, Adam Svensson has withdrawn. He is not in the tournament this week. So make notes of that as you go on with your research this week, that those 4 players so far have withdrawn from the Charles Schwab Challenge. All right, so there's a look at difficult, and I really thought we were going to do quite a bit with difficult today or this evening. Turns out we're not going to be taking a whole lot look of that, just due to what I see as the forecast. We saw briefly in the historic conditions that if the wind dies down, rounds can even get into the easy range. We're definitely not going to be looking at easy, but I don't think I want to look at average scoring rounds either. With that, regardless of when the wind has died down, picked up, or anything, you see these fairways have generally been pretty darn difficult to hit. Not too dissimilar from Oak Hill we just saw last week. Now, there are certainly some rounds where it can get easy and whatnot, but for the majority of the past 5 years and even further, the fairways have been pretty difficult to hit. So what I want to do, let's take a look at some off-the-tee metrics when hitting fairways are difficult. So in those circumstances, since the beginning of 2021, Your top off the tee players have been Cameron Champ, Sung Jae, Hayden Buckley, Luke List, Victor Hovland, Cam Davis, Austin Smotherman, Scotty Scheffler, Emiliano Grillo, and Brent Grant. Again, skipping Keith Mitchell, he is withdrawn. So there's a look at your top off the tee players when a fairway is difficult to hit, and I'm sure we're going to look at that even further when we get to the driving page view a little bit later on here. But now I'm going to remove that filter, and because we have the 2021 timeline still up, we know we're on bent greens, and now we can add lightning. I'm probably just going to look at fast, however, because I can't click the correct thing. We're going to look at bent greens, fast bent greens, and again, the reason being that the majority of the rounds here at Colonial have been fast. You've had a few rounds of average, sure, but about 85-90% of the rounds here at Colonial have been have been labeled as fast per Fantasy National. So, since the beginning of 2021, your best putters on fast bent greens. There you go. Fast bent greens. Your best putters have been Christian Bezuidenhout, Alex Noren, Justin Lauer, Sam Burns, Justin Rose, Brendan Todd, Denny McCarthy, Maverick McNeely, Ricky Fowler, and Eric Compton. So give these players a decent little consideration as you move forward with your research this week, as I think putting is going to be a decent factor. We haven't seen it, or we did not see it as a spike performance for winners. It was fairly consistent throughout the top 10, 5, and winners last night in the course breakdown. So not sure how much percentage I'm going to have, but I'm certainly going to have an amount of percentage in fast bent putting in my mixed condition model. All right, with that, let's go ahead and shrink this timeline to the beginning of 2023. I still want to look at a few different metrics here. Let's uncheck the two filters we have. The most important shot type in golf and at Colonial Country Club, strokes gained approach. So your top strokes gained approach players since the beginning of this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Ricky Fowler, Victor Hovland, Tom Hoge, Sepp Straka, Akshay Bhatia, Nate Lashley, and Max Homa. So another week where I'm going to have strokes gained approach be at the focal point of my mixed condition model. We saw a lot of that last night in the course breakdown in Fantasy National. All right, I think that's going to do it for review and whatnot. We looked a little bit at difficult. Again, I've talked a few times now about how I'm not comfortable with doing any short course filters. I don't like doing the par 70 and mid-length. It's a very, very narrow sample in that regard. Not too many courses, as we talked about that last week as well for Oak Hill. Evening, P, thanks for jumping into chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully your PGA Championship went well. You had plenty of Brooks Koepka, and you avoided almost everybody that I said to avoid. If you did, you did good. But thanks for jumping in chat. And we are going to try and turn it around for the Charles Schwab Challenge. All right. So we've looked at approach. We looked at off the tee when fairways were difficult to hit. We looked at fast bent putting. Talked about how I do not want to use any course length metrics. No wind, at least as of now, in the forecast, and we'll update that obviously Wednesday evening at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show, but no wind looking like in the forecast. So let's go ahead and jump straight into these prior leaderboards. And one common thing you will see is that these winning scores are not too dissimilar from what we saw at the PGA Championship. -9, 8, 7. Now you'll have quite a few more players that are under par, but no one's running away with a -20 or 22 or anything like that. This has generally been a pretty difficult course. You see, -9 was the winner last year in a playoff. 2021, you had -14, and you had a couple of rounds of average, and generally you don't have very many rounds that are average here. So 14, 9, winning score 15, and this was the easiest year, I believe, that the Charles Schwab had ever been. 2019, you had a 13, and then second was a -9. So scores generally don't get very, very low here. And if we take a look at the strokes gained page view and take a look at, we'll say the top 14. Actually, no, that's a very nice, convenient cutoff. Top 20, just due to ties. We see that, look at the bevy of approach up, especially at the top of the leaderboard. Few players negative and off the tee, but really only one player was horrifically negative last year and off the tee. That's Kevin Na, who is a former champion here, so he was never doing it off the tee anyway. You can see he had very good iron play and was doing it with his patented short game when he was on the PGA Tour. But not a lot of players were heavy in terms of negative and off the tee. Around the green looks fairly consistent, but you don't have any big spike numbers like you do in the strokes gained approach. You have 7.8s and 7.7s, whereas in the around the green you have a 4.4. Is that the highest? Yeah, 4.4 being the highest. Decent correlation in terms of cut making, but nothing elite except for maybe Jordan Spieth. Whereas in the approach, you got a 7th, 4th, and 4th, a 2nd, your winner, pretty high up here, and then putting, pretty darn solid. So this is why I feel that putting and using fast bent is going to be a little bit more integral into my mixed condition model this week, for the sense that you have some pretty significant putting here and when you sort on the leaderboard. And if we look at 2021 as well, a little bit lower scoring, but we can still get a feel for the strokes gained, as Kokrak never really was a good putter. He had a good putting week. But you can see the inconsistency with the around the green. This is 19 players just due to ties. You can see how many players were negative in terms of around the green. It's still in the approach. The off the tee is still pretty darn solid. Putting, you have really one huge spike performance from Sebastian Munoz in 2021, but otherwise you might have some individual spike performances, like Kokrak gaining 5.5 is generally not what you would expect from Jason Kokrak, but nothing in terms of computer game numbers except for maybe Sebastian Munoz. But there's a look at the putting. Is again just solid correlation here. Approach, just massive amounts of correlation. Your winners up here, several top 10s and top 5s. So we're going to be looking at the two main shot types, approach and putting. We'll do a little bit with off the tee, but I think we might be splitting that out a little bit this week. Although in 2021, your winner did lead in off the tee. Of course, that is kind of Jason Kokrak's thing as well. So let's go into a little bit more detailed data. Let's start with the driving tab and fairways, greens, good drives, and all that. And again, from last year, we'll take the top 20, just convenient for ties. Distance was big for the elite finishers. You see, only 2 players in the top 11 were negative, 3 players in the top 11, but it really does fall off fairly quickly after that. Whereas the consistent performing metric in the top 20 is good drives gained, and it's really kind of leading or being buoyed up by the greens. You had Scotty Scheffler at a 12.6. Doesn't look like anybody was even close to him. Well, Shez at 10.6. Okay, good drives. You had a second, a third, and a seventh, very, very high up here. You had a fourth a little bit further down. What was the greens? Second, fourth, first. So about the same in terms of correlation, roughly the same. I kind of like the idea of good drives this week because we know the fairways are difficult to hit. We saw that last night in the course breakdown. These greens are small, so hitting the greens aren't going to be easy in general anyway. It does feel like good drives gained would be a good statistic for this week. And we also saw in Microsoft Excel last night that driving distance wasn't really a big factor here. It was almost 50% less important than the average full field course. So doesn't look like we're going to be doing much with distance. Looking like good drives gained, maybe some greens, but again, I'm kind of leaning on this good drives gained. Let's see what 2021 looks like. Yeah, a lot more of the same here. Top 19. Again, for your elite finishers, players in the top 7, distance might have been a little something, but look how quickly it falls off. All these players that are negative in distance, instead, they're hitting fairways, good drives gained. If we sort, I'm kind of curious on this fairways. Your winner was 4th in fairways. Okay. In good drives gained, he led or tied for the lead with Corey Connors. It looks like he was 2nd in greens. So yeah, looking much more like good drives gained and greens. So when we move to this year's field, we'll go to fairways and greens. We'll go to the driving tab. We'll take a look at a couple of different things, a couple of different ways, but we'll take a generic look at it first. So your top good drives gained players since the beginning of this calendar year have been Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Hayden Buckley, Russell Henley, Nate Lashley, Tyler Duncan, Aaron Rai, Ryan Armour, Matthew Neesmith, and Luke List. There's your top 10 in good drives gained, no filters, no anything, just since the beginning of this calendar year. Moving over to greens, that top 10 is Scheffler, Jaeger, Joseph Bramlett, Colin Morikawa, Will Gordon, Aaron Rai, Tony Finau, Hayden Buckley, Luke List, and Nate Lashley. So quite a bit of overlap here. Looks like about 6 of the 10 are the same on good drives gained in greens. Stephan Jaeger is 12th in good drives, so he's getting it more in the greens as opposed to the fairways. Same for Joseph Bramlett. He always has distance. He's not really doing it in the fairways. Will Gordon, much the same. Tony Finau. So, okay, good list of names there, especially across both metrics there. If we look at, let's look at good drives gained when it's difficult, just in case the wind picks up or the forecast changes, the course still plays difficult even with the wind calms or wind stays down. Your top good drives gained players when a round is difficult, and we'll have to expand this out to 2021. Those players are Colin Morikawa, Kevin Streelman, Sung Jae, Alex Smalley, Brendan Todd, Victor Hovland, Martin Laird, Tom Hoagie, Russell Knox, and Ches Reavie. I'm really, really liking this list here, as this is a lot of the players that qualify under the pattern from previous winners that I have seen and that I posted earlier today on social media. Quite a few of these names are actually in that list, and there's 8 of them. So I encourage you to check out social media, which the link is in the description, to my Twitter, to my Instagram, that I explain this a little bit, further into detail. But a lot that I like here. So depending on what the wind is doing throughout the week, I'm liking this good drives gained when it's difficult. I like good drives gained in general. We can look at greens when it's difficult. I unchecked it, but we'll look at greens when it's difficult. Those players are Colin Morikawa, Alex Smalley, Scotty Scheffler, Will Gordon, Russell Knox, Luke List, Kevin Streelman, Victor Hovland, Sung Jae, and Joseph Bramlett. So, again, a heavy overlap here between the good drives gained players and greens and regulation players. Nothing more looking like that I want to see in terms of filter for this week, particularly with the driving tab. Not going to look at anything with scrambling, as even though this course and this tournament generally yields difficult rounds to par, scrambling is actually easier here than the average tour event. So scrambling in itself is not difficult here, and I don't think that's going to be something that we want to focus on. I'll leave this up just in case, but yeah, I don't think scrambling game. We could look at some sand saves, so let's do that. We'll look at sand saves. Let's just look at sand saves this calendar year. Don't think I want to add any filter to that. Your top sand saves gained players this calendar year: Justin Rose, Siwoo, S.H. Kim, Robbie Shelton, Harry Higgs, Ben Griffin, Sung Jae, Mav McNeely, Brendan Todd, and Ben Allen. Sand saves isn't something that I look to a lot. So not sure I'm going to have it, but I know I'm not going to do anything with scrambling. We might have some around the green. If it is, I might look at sand saves. I'm not sure yet. I really don't know how I feel about around the green here this week. So there is a look at the driving page view in the stats that I'm keyed in on. Mostly good drives gained, maybe a little bit of greens, but mostly good drives. Let's go ahead and move on to scoring. And this was really interesting last night in Microsoft Excel, in the sense that it was birdies gained was the leading metric of the two, between birdies gained and bogeys avoided, which is interesting, because if a round is difficult, if a course is difficult, you think pars are good scores, that means you would want to avoid bogeys. But that's part of why we dig into this so heavily in the Data Dive show. I want to see where this data is coming from that's showing that the birdies gained was the more important factor. So we can see right from the beginning, last year, your winner was heavily favoring the birdies gained as opposed to the bogeys avoided. We got bogeys here, bogeys, bogeys. So it looks like a pretty decently even split of players here that are favoring the birdies and the bogeys. If we sort an 8.4, you do have a miscut fairly high up here in the birdies gained. Oh my, look at this. So Stuart Sink, very high in the birdies. He's probably going to be pretty high in the bogeys, but he apparently had a bunch of doubles too. So maybe doubles is something we want to look at. Not sure. But there's the correlation with birdies gained, bogeys avoided. Again, fairly solid, but your winner led in the birdies at an 8.4. And then double bogeys, again, this is generally what I've seen for majority of the tournaments. The highest is a 1.4. So not sure. If we look at the top 20, well, that doesn't really help us either, because every single player in the top 20 was positive in both. So in the top 34, you had more players positive in birdies gained. Okay, but doesn't look like it's a clear, definitive leading metric like it showed in Excel. Let's see about 2021. See what's going on there. This is the top 19. You had two players negative in birdies gained, and they were only negative 0.6, where you had a negative 2 and a negative 1. Okay, but again, your winner leading in birdies gained, 10.4, and clearly ahead of the next closest competitors. So, man, and that's some pretty darn strong correlation. I mean, Zach Johnson's a middling finish here, but first, third, second, third, eighth, ace. It's pretty darn strong. Whereas the bogeys avoided, again, fairly strong, but you have a 40th, 45th, a couple of 20ths. So, at least in the previous 2 years, looking like it's the birdies gained. And if that's the case, again, I don't know how I feel about putting difficult to it, because if the wind does indeed stay down, I don't think the course is going to play as difficult. So we'll take a look at this a couple of different ways. I'm only going to look at birdies gained. I'm not going to look at birdies are better, because there's only one hole that is a decent eagle opportunity, and it's a good opportunity, but really only just one hole. So don't think eagles are going to be a pretty big factor. Evening, Joey. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully you had a good PGA championship, much better than mine at least, and are ready for the Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial. So again, with no eagles, I'm just going to be looking at birdies gained. We'll take a look at it in a couple of different ways, but we'll just take a kind of a snapshot or an overview look first. So with no filters, no anything, just your top birdies gained players since the beginning of this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Sung Jae, Max Homa, Dylan Wu, Akshay Bhatia, Siwoo Kim, and Ricky Fowler. Those are your top 10 birdies gained players this calendar year. We'll expand this timeline. We'll go to beginning of 2021. I mean, the default is going to be difficult, but I don't see really much else in terms of filters that we might want to look at. Maybe on fast bent greens, but I would think putting would take care of that combination of filters. Again, par 70s that are medium length is a very, very narrow set of data, so I'm not sure I want to go that narrow. So your top birdies gained players when a round has been difficult since the beginning of 2021: Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Colin Morikawa, Scott Piercy, Sam Burns, Justin Rose, Davis Riley, Justin Suh, and MJ Duffy. I'm skipping Keith Mitchell. He is already withdrawn, along with 3 other names that I have seen: Taylor Montgomery, Parker Cootie, and Adams Vinson. All right. Because if we did a little bit of this last week, trying to prep for Oak Hill. But if I look at par 70s that are medium length, 72 to 7400, there aren't a lot of rounds here. We have the Charles Schwab, where we are this week, the St. Jude, and we have the Tour Championship at Eastlake. That is it. That's all we have. And I don't think we want to narrow our focus on essentially 2 tournaments. Yes, the Tour Championship's in there, but not everybody, only 30 players make the Tour Championship. So really we would only be looking at 2 courses as the entirety of this set of data, and one of them is the course we're at. I really don't like doing that. So that's why I am very, very, very hesitant to do anything with, say, par 70, 7,200, 7,400, things like that. And if we look at just course length, you're getting a whole lot of different types of courses in there. Nothing to do with architect, so not sure what I know I'm going to be using birdies gained. I don't know if I'm going to be using a filter, and if I do, which one. Perhaps opportunities might be something. that we might want to take a look at as well. So your top players this calendar year at giving themselves opportunities or at ops gained. Scotty Scheffler, Victor, Tony Finau, Tom Hoge, Chris Kirk, Ben Martin, Sam Stevens, Ryan Palmer, Ricky Fowler, Sung Jae, and Akshay Bhatia. All right. So there's that. And that's really, birdies gained, maybe opportunities gained. That's about all I'm going on in this page view. Let's go to something that'll be very, very interesting, the proximity. And the reason I say it's going to be interesting, it generally is for me because I don't like proximity as a statistician. It's just too volatile and inconsistent. You have 25% of your approach shots come from 150 to 175 here at Colonial over the years. So that would be the most prevalent range. However, when we went to Microsoft Excel last night, and we'll see it again later tonight, it didn't matter. It really didn't matter in terms of leaderboard success. And in fact, 150 to 175, this is 2021, but your top two players were negative. Let me go to this year so that way I keep on my kind of schedule before I throw myself off. Now, Sam Burns was pretty good from that range last year. Your top 20, again, pretty middling. You had some really bad performances. Pat Perez and Chris Kirk. You had some great performances. I mean, Sam Burns, that's a very high number for this range. Kevin Na, John Huh. Total procs is something that is pretty correlating, to be honest with you. You have three pretty poor cuts made here, but 7th, 15th, 12th, 15th, 4ths, 3rds. But how much is total procs really going to matter when the average proximity is 4 feet closer than the average tour event? I don't like the idea of procs this week. If we sort on the 150 to 175, you've got a pretty high miscut, although your winner's somewhat high up here. Middling, top 25, top 15, middling to clunker. Not very consistent here, at least in terms of 2022. We'll go to 2021 in the proximity. Again, your first and second negative in it. The total procs is the consistent metric. And if you sort on it, I mean, that's some pretty strong correlation here. 3rd, 7th, 8th, 15th. Middling finishes mixed through here, but Jason Kokrak, pretty high in total procs. But how much does it really matter? I don't think it does. If we sort on the 150 to 175, you have a decent run of your cut makers that are performing well in that metric, but nothing elite. So that's why I am really thrown off with proximity in general, let alone on a specific example like this, when there is a clear, most prevalent approach shot length, and yet the data is showing that it just isn't contributing to leaderboard success. So when we go to this year's field, trying to skip ahead apparently, we'll go to proximity. We'll take a look at total procs and 150 to 175. So your top total procs players in the field this week at the Charles Schwab: Victor Hovland, Nate Lashley, Ryan Armour, Tom Hoge, Tony Finau, Russell Henley, Michael Kim, Davis Riley, Justin Suh, and Ches Reavie. Your top 150 to 175 players: Emiliano Grillo, Scott Piercy, Victor Hovland, Sepp Straka, Jordan Spieth, Scotty Scheffler, Russell Knox, Siwoo Kim, Eric Van Rooyen, and Tom Hoge. So again, another example of that. I'm just not confident in procs. Not sure what I want to do with it this week. So I'd be curious to hear from the community. Put it in chat. Put it in the comments. How are you seeing proximity based on the prior leaderboards, what you're seeing from the course breakdown in Fantasy National. What do you think about proximity? All right, but now to some more clear-cut data, at least in my opinion. We'll go to pars 3s, 4s, and 5s. We saw last night that the par 3s were a little bit mitigated, except for one specific range, and that was the 175 to 200s. 3 of the 4 par 3s measured to here on the scorecard. You got 190, 192, and 195, maybe 199. And then the 4th par 3 measures to 240 something. But the par 3s in general didn't really add a whole lot for the winner. Only 2.5 total, but it's still fairly correlating. The 175 to 200, a 4.6, a 1.4, and a 1.4. So clearly it's the 175 to 200 if there is a range. And to emphasize that point even more, we'll go to 2021. Again, not a huge amount of success for your winner, but it does have some amount of correlation here. You have a 7th, a 3rd, a top 15, a few top 20s. Looking at the specific range, 1.8, 4.1, 1.2, and 2.6. So clearly the highest is in the 175 to 200. So your top par 3 performers from 175 to 200 yards this calendar year: Sam Burns, Ricky Fowler, Denny McCarthy, Kurt Kitayama, Scotty Scheffler, Sung Jae, Ben Taylor, Callum Tarrant, Cody Gribble, and Sam Ryder. Quite an interesting list of names here. But 3 of the 4 par 3s measured to this length. So these players should have a pretty distinct advantage on that area of the golf course. All right, par 4s. And a very telling metric indeed, as the majority of your par 4s fall from 400 to 450. 7 of your 12 fall in this range. You have 2 here and 3 here. So all things being equal, it should be the 400 to 450 that would be the leading range. However, look, your winner was pretty poor from that range last year. Top 20, about the same. 3 in the short, 2 that were negative in the medium, and then you had quite a few that were negative on the long par 4s here. But the par 4s in general, I mean, it's just 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 4th, 12th, 12th, 1st, 4th, 7th. That's pretty damn correlating. You had a 6.4, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 4th. Seems pretty good. 6.5, a little bit less correlating because you have some double digits in here. Granted, these double digits are 15ths and 12ths and all that, so it's still pretty strong. It's not the 450 to 5, I can tell you that. Look at all these miscuts in here that are fairly high up. So we're looking at short par 4s this week at Colonial. Again, just 2nd, 3rd, 1st, 3rd, 14th, 20th, and then more single-digit finishes. Where you got Michael Block. He is not in this set of data yet. He'll be updated tomorrow when we go to the DraftKings page. And I don't ever look at the DraftKings page until Tuesday and then Wednesday night. But it's a great story. Not sure how I'm going to be looking at Michael Block because he gained a lot of strokes putting. And you know how I feel about putting. It is very, very fickle. So, great story. I'm glad he's here at Colonial. He deserves to be here at Colonial. Not sure how he's going to fare. They showed Brooks in a suite at the Hurricanes just now. He looks, oh yeah, he's absolutely toasted. Yeah, I mean, Block seems like a cool dude. Brooks seems like a cool dude too. But yeah, Brooks was on. What was he on? He was on something earlier today, and he said that like the next 4 days for him are just loaded. He's doing 2 Panthers games. He's doing a baseball game in there, or maybe it's an NBA game. And then he's supposed to play live this weekend, and he doesn't even know how he's good. He basically said, "I'm not going to play worth a damn," which is pretty funny, and I appreciate the honesty. So, yeah. So coming back to the Charles Schwab, we're looking at short par fours, nothing else to it. So let's go to the field. This week's field, your top par 4 performers this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Chris Kirk, Max Homa, Tony Finau, Taylor Moore, Victor Hovland, Nick Taylor, Jordan Spieth, Thomas Detry, Stefan Jaeger, and Ben Martin. If we're looking at the 2 shortest ranges, I still think 400-450 is the most important range, but clearly from prior leaderboards, both of these ranges mattered. So from 350 to 400, Vincent Norman, Denny McCarthy, Eric Cole, Danny Willett, Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, Russell Henley, Cody Gribble, Taylor Moore, and Chris Kirk. And then from 400 to 450, Scotty Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, Nick Taylor, Colin Morikawa, Chris Kirk, Tony Finau, Akshay Bhatia, Hayden Buckley, Ben Martin, Taylor Moore, and Eric Van Rooyen. Again, skipping Taylor Montgomery, he is withdrawn. So there's a list of players you need to give a lot of consideration to. Par 4s are very, very important. And then we'll do the par 5s very, very quickly. 4.5, but again, doesn't look tremendously important. And at least it wasn't for your top performers. And then in 2021... par 5s, not a huge amount of importance, and the lengths are pretty scattered. So we're just going to look at par 5s in general. Your top par 5 performers this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Sung Jae, Jordan Spieth, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Dylan Wu, Colin Morikawa, K.H. Lee, Vincent Norman, and Andrew Putnam. All right. We're going to move to the Microsoft Excel portion. I realized that I forgot to bring up one file, so let me do that very, very quickly, if I can remember where my life is here. This one. Okay. So let me switch the view for you all. And we will go to the Charles Schwab. And last year, looks like it was a decent model. So here's my top 20. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 missed cuts in the top 20. A little bit high on the high side, but I did have the winner in my top 20, who was pretty unpopular at least, at 10.5. A second, a couple of sevenths, so a decent performing mixed condition model. I wouldn't say it was fantastic, but it was certainly decent. If we sort on the results and then take a look at what I looked at. So 20% strokes gained approach seems reasonable. It really does. This ball striking course, it's the most important shot type here at Colonial. 15% in proc. So I did use a lot of proximity, total proximity last year. Okay. For the top 19, how did that look? Because it doesn't look like it was very predictive. Yeah, pretty close. 48. That's not bad, actually. Maybe proximity is something we want to take a look at. Clearly, 10% I'm getting back this year. Not going to do anything with strokes gained total. Looks like wind was a pretty big factor last year. 10% in par fours. Okay, so I see what I did. I did 10% in all par fours, and then I split out the 350 and 4 and 400 to 450 each for 10%. So, excuse me, really I had about 30% in par fours, and then I split out these individual lengths. Okay. All right. I can see that, considering what we just saw in terms of those prior leaderboards. Interesting. Another 5% I'm getting back. Strokes gained total difficult, so there's 15% I'm getting back. I did look at opportunities gained. I looked at greens. Both of those when they're difficult, which makes a lot of sense. Generally, this course is difficult. I don't think it's going to be as difficult if the wind stays down. I only looked at the particular length of par threes. I still think you probably need to upgrade this percentage a little bit, but I only looked at that length of par threes, and I didn't single out any length of par fives. I just looked at par fives and left those at 5%. So a lot of the same of what I'm feeling for this year. Let's see how predictive these were very, very quickly. And I want to average. Again, I'll just go to the top. Let's do the top 22. Yeah, let's do the top 22. And see how those look. Okay, interesting. So let me clean this up a little bit so you all can see it, and I will bring you over there. So, of the metrics that I used last year, the most predictive was the strokes gained total in the wind, which we're not going to be doing anything with, especially if the wind dies down this year. So, approach was pretty solid at a 47 and a half. Oh, look at that. Par fours in general, just par fours in general, 43. That's very strong. Strokes gained total difficult was pretty good. Proximity wasn't terrible. Again, I'm going to the top 22, not the top 19. So proximity was okay. 350 to 4, 400 to 450, okay. Opportunities really wasn't interesting to see. The par threes weren't really. Okay. All right. Not sure how much value that gives, but I always like to see how predictive or the metrics were in previous mixed condition models. So I will sort this back on my rankings. So again, a decent results-oriented mixed condition model. Nothing great. Not terrible. Again, really kind of saved by the fact that I had a second, seventh, and the winner, and a fourth, all inside the top 20 to kind of even out a lot of these missed cuts up here. Okay. All right, so there was last year's mixed condition model and how I looked at the Charles Schwab. We'll move now to, let's go to the comparison course and let's look at the detail here. Just very quickly. You see approach, the biggest key in terms of the total raw number, putting pretty high. Around the green and off the tee are actually pretty similar, but I want you to notice that around the green number from 2022, a massive high outlier. This is a massive low outlier. If you remove both of those, okay, so it's still roughly about the same. Whereas off the tee has been a lot more consistent in terms of its importance. But clearly we're looking at approach and then putting. Again, this driving distance number, not important at all. I'll just take you to the evaluation of it. The driving distance, 44 and a half. That's not important at all. Fairways gained, pretty big. Good drives gained. So I'm thinking we're looking at good drives gained this week. That's a pretty big number for that metric. Again, birdies and bogeys, bigger raw number, and the bigger percentage is in the birdies gained versus the bogeys avoided. So looking like we're going to go birdies gained in some way, form, or fashion. Where we're really going to gain a lot of insight in terms of the raw data, specifically par 3s, 4s, and 5s. So this is the most important range. At a .64, making up about half of the total par 3s. So when it gets to about half, that's when you start considering putting it on its own category. It's clearly outweighing all of the other lengths by far, so probably correct to put this at on its own. But par 3s kind of don't give a whole lot in general. It's really the par 4s. I mean, look at these massive numbers here. 5.17, a 2.5, a 1.87, just to give you an idea of how it compares against other full field courses, like 17%, 105%, 45%. Massive numbers here. So we're definitely going to be singling out both of these ranges. I kind of like what I did with last year's, honestly. 10% in all par 4s, 10% 350 to 4, 10% in the 400 to 450. All right, finally, par 5s. Pretty mitigated. Again, only 2 par 5s, so not a lot to gain there. And they've been very, very consistent. So another week where I'm seeing 5% in strokes gained par 5 like I did with last year's Charles Schwab. Just not a whole lot of importance. And then proximity. Kind of hard to do with the raw numbers. Proximity, you kind of have to just use comparison. So the total prox is slightly more important, but you know, the 150 to 175, negative. 125 to 150, negative. So I just don't know how I feel about the proximity. I just don't know how I feel with its importance. So anyway, there's a look at Colonial and the Charles Schwab in terms of raw data. We're going to finish the show off as we normally do on a Monday. Let's take a look at some of our top performers historically, or at least in the past 5 years, here at Colonial in these metrics that we feel that are going to be the most important. So your top strokes gained approach players the past 5 years here at Colonial. Davis Riley, it's only one time, but Colin Morikawa. Christian Bezuidenhout has been very good with the iron. It's only 2 times, but still pretty good. Griot, doing Griot things. Tony Finau. Charlie Hoffman's had some success here. Scotty Scheffler. Where's Spieth? He's the highest strokes gained total player. So Spieth only had a .3. He's doing it all in the short game. So maybe there is a little bit to add into the around the green. I'll have to think about that over the next day and a half or so, or 2 days before the Wednesday DFS Tactics show. But there's your top strokes gained approach players the past 5 years here at Colonial. Your top putters the past 5 years at Colonial. Imagine Jordan Spieth very high up there. So Harris English is your leader. Brendan Todd, Jordan Spieth, Troy Merritt. Not as all-inspiring in terms of success, but high up here in putting. Justin Rose, a former champion here. Mark Hubbard. Patrick Rogers is 2 for 4 with pretty good average finish. Cam Davis, generally really good on bit. Victor Hovland. Richie Wierenski. Okay. So there's your top putters. Let's do good drives gained for the driving tab. Top good drives gained players past 5 years here at Colonial. Scotty Scheffler, Emiliano Griot, Kevin Streelman. Brian Harmon, Justin Rose, Brendan Todd, Tony Finau, Jaeger, but he's only played it once. Chez Reavie, not played this tournament all that well, but yet has pretty good drives gained here. Sung Jae, Billy Horschel, Adam Long. Okay. I'm going to skip the birdies gained just because we're running a little bit over on time. I want to look at par 3s, 175 to 200. Lipsky, Rye, Hodges, all one time. So there's Morikawa. Rory Sabatini, there's a name for you. 5 for 5 the last 5 years here at Colonial. 5 for 5 in terms of making the cut. I'm not going to go out and pick Rory Sabatini to win the tournament, but if you're looking for a value DFS play, at least before I know what prices are and ownership, that seems like a pretty unique name. Rory Sabatini, 5 for 5. He's doing well in terms of par 3s at least. Svensson is out of the tournament. I need to remove that line. Cam Davis. Tyler Duncan, 3 for 3. Justin Rose. McNeely, 3 for 4. Griot, 4 for 5. There's Spieth. Okay. I'm going to sort on the par 4s, and then we'll look across at the particular lengths of the par 4s. So I'm going to sort on par 4s. All right, so Riley, there's Finau. He's doing it in both, of course. Jordan Spieth doing it in both of the 2 shorter ones. Brian Harmon. Victor Hovland's been doing much better at the 450 to 5. Or, excuse me, the 400 to 450. Justin Rose doing it much more in the 350 to 4s. Scotty Scheffler. Charlie Hoffman doing it much more in the 400 to 450. Okay. Morikawa, Sung Jae, Max Homa. There's Rory Sabatini again playing just pretty solid here. Across. Griot. Ryan Palmer. Adam Long, 3 for 4. Doing it in the 400 to 450. Okay. Last metric I'll sort on. We'll take a look at the specific procs, 150 to 175. But again, I don't know how much it leads to a lot of success. Morikawa's been successful. Jimmy Walker's been mediocre. CT Pan's been good. Sam Ryder's not been good. Burns is your defending champion. Brian Harmon, Cameron Champ, and Hoagie's been really bad. Piercy's been pretty bad. Fratelli's been pretty bad. So that's why I don't know how I feel about proximity. But the most prevalent length of approach shot is from 150 to 175 here at Colonial, and these are the performances of the players in the field this week, historically at Colonial. All right, let me resort this on the average finish for you all. And that's going to do it for tonight's Data Dive Show. Thanks to P and Joey for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully your all's PGA Championship went a whole lot better than mine. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, and supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. It's always appreciated. I wouldn't be able to do it without you as the audience. I love doing what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, trying to win a little bit of money in the process. Let me know in the comments, have you made any wagers? If you have, who have you wagered? I certainly fired off 2 quick wagers this morning when the odds came out. Who are you looking at in terms of an early lean or fade or pivot or whatnot for DFS? And as always, if you have any questions, reach out on social media. We'd be happy to help you in that regard. Darnell, jump in at the very, very end of the show. But thanks for tuning in. Always appreciated. Bez, Fleetwood, Rose, Core. I don't hate Rose. That's for sure. Bezadenhout's interesting. Fleetwood has only played here once, so I mean, without going through a whole spiel. I certainly don't hate Rose, again, as a former champion here, but I'll really start digging into the DFS tomorrow, prices, ownerships, and all that, in preparation for Wednesday night's DFS Tactics show. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on social media, either Twitter or Instagram. Would be happy to help you out in that regard if you are looking for a specific answer to a question or anything like that. And mentioning social media, I posted that research earlier today around the previous winners at the Charles Schwab. So if you would like to see the 8 players that qualify under the set of criteria that I have found, go check out social media. But thanks again to everyone who tunes in and watches and supports the channel. It's always appreciated for all of the wagers you've made so far this week for the Charles Schwab Challenge, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Charles Schwab Challenge. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.